Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got what I hope will be a really informative and interesting session for you this evening. I'm joined by three guests who are a mix of people who've been involved in clinical trials and then also Hannah, who works on clinical trials. So, Hannah is a research physiotherapist at the London Spinal Cord Injury Centre. Tara is our chair of trustees and was a participant in a trial a couple of years ago. And then Suzanne is also a trial participant. So we're obviously really excited to have this great panel today. We're going to be, I guess, pulling the curtain back on clinical trials, really understanding the role that they play in bringing us much closer to real world treatments for spinal cord injuries. Before we get started, though, we're going to share a video with you where we will hear from one of our researchers and a participant in a trial that we funded.
It can happen to anyone. A spinal injury can happen to anyone. I basically walked out the front door and didn't walk back through it. I was 25. I was still living at my mum's at the time, but I was probably at the peak of my job at that point. And then to wake up and then realise that everything I worked for as that's gone. It's pretty crazy.
A spinal cord injury takes seconds. It can happen to anybody at any time. I do this work, my team do this job because we believe we can make a difference to people's lives.
Yeah, that's Kaylee. I don't know what I'd do without her, to be fair. So I was in hospital when we got together. It gave me a massive confidence boost. Like, I can still live my life. It isn't just over as soon as you're in a wheelchair. Before the accident, I see someone in a wheelchair, I just assume that they couldn't move their legs, but like there is so much more to it. And obviously the higher the injury, the more complications there can be. The nerve pain, the spasticity that you can get. Also the bowel and bladder situation where you have no control, really. You've got to keep to a routine. You have to use medication to help with that.
There are more connections in the spinal cord than there are stars in the sky. It is incredibly complicated. Spinal research are incredibly important to scientists in the UK and across the world. What sets spinal research apart is that they fund scientific research and they have a huge interaction with the scientists, the clinicians and patients. Because they are fundamental in the field, they know everybody, they help make connections, which will make a benefit to patients' lives.
By Spinal Research funding the trial with the Pathfinder stimulator and giving me this opportunity, managed to get so much come back. Like, I've had muscle movements come back. Sensation in bowel and bladder, which is the biggest thing. I've got so much confidence in myself, so much belief. Honestly, it makes me feel on cloud nine, really. Even the littlest thing gives you that independence back, and that's what people want.
I truly think that given time and resources, we truly can cure spinal cord injury. But in the meantime, and in getting to that point, we can make substantial differences to individuals' lives.
Try live a day, one day, in a similar situation to me and others in a wheelchair, and then tell me why you wouldn't want to help fund spinal research. The technology is there, it's just they need more funding. They need more help to help people. If these muscles are coming back with the help of a stimulator, anything is possible.
You can be part of the journey that delivers a hugely significant medical breakthrough for the 21st century. Together, we can cure paralysis.
Brilliant, thank you. So obviously over the last year, we have seen some really incredible developments in this space. Very recently, the ArchiEx system was approved for use in the UK, and this is the first ever specifically developed function restoring treatment for chronic spinal cord injury. And of course, clinical trials were a big part of its journey. Tara, you were obviously part of the same trial that we've just had Dan talking about, involving transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation using a device that was from the same company that has developed the ARC-EX. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your injury and then how you came to be involved in the trial?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Tara Stewart. I fell off a horse, landed on my head, broke my neck at C67. So I am a C67 tetraplegic, incomplete tetraplegic. Although I should say, at Spinal Research, we don't talk about complete and incomplete anymore because most spinal cord injuries, unless the cord is entirely severed, are incomplete because there's always some tissue left over. And that's quite important because that's what this machine works on. So so I became part of the trial. I heard about the trial. COVID turned out to be really lucky for me because I heard about the trial and it was already a year in, and I thought, oh God, I've missed it, and I'd really love to have a go at something like that, and that would be amazing. I thought I wouldn't be able to apply, but I did put my name down. I thought, well, I'll just, because then I found out they were still looking, and because of COVID and other delays, it had taken a lot longer to recruit. They were looking at 12 people. They'd actually only ever got 10, I think, for results. So I applied. I had to have an MRI to obviously so people could see that spinal injury was where I said it was and what I said it was, and also to check that I didn't have a syrinx, which was contraindicated, so that if you had one, you couldn't take part. And then a sort of general, answered lots of questions, and then all of that sort of went through. And then I had to wait because, in actual fact, all the places had been taken. I was like one of the last. But then, very unfortunately, the person whose place I took, they did get a syrinx, or they were diagnosed with a syrinx, so they had to drop out. And then I was asked if I could move in. So I was literally the last person. So I went through. So there were people who were almost like a year ahead of me on the trial.
Amazing, thank you. Obviously, that trial is just one that we hope to be of many going forward. Here at Spinal Research, we've recently launched the Recovery Alliance to accelerate the delivery of more treatments like the ARC-EX. Could you talk a little bit about the vision behind the Alliance and what we hope to achieve with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really exciting time because when I first got out of hospital, one of the first things I did, which I guess everybody does, is I kind of Googled to find out, where treatments were and what was happening. And at the time, it seemed that there were lots and lots of avenues of science that were being explored, but no one particular thing was delivering. And it felt like there was a very sort of scattergun approach over the whole field, and nothing that was really happening. And that was sort of back in when I was injured in 2014, got out of hospital in 2015. So that was 10 years ago. And now, 10 years later, I have taken part in not one but two trials. And we are here as Spinal Research. Obviously, our mission is to cure paralysis, but we want to do that by funding and accelerating the most promising therapies and treatments. And we're actually now in a position today that we can actually start, with a treatment that's been licensed to be used in the UK that we know can restore function. We are now looking at other therapies that are very close behind it. So, real clinical trials with people in this country testing out things. And the Alliance, the whole idea behind that is to link all these things together. So there are other tangible things that we're looking at. So obviously, Louisa, I know you're going to talk about the clinical trial tracker. So you can sign up, put your name down, put your details in, and you'll get contacted about what trials, are close to you or suitable for you. We're also looking at building a wearable app. That's a sort of two-way thing that can provide you all with information and help, but also record your information and help, and that be fed back to the research teams so that they can use all of that data. Because of course, one of the most complicated things about a spinal injury is that all is individual as a fingerprint. So the more data we can have about, what's happening in the real world, the more we can feed that in to tailor therapy. So we're moving from that point. I mean, one of the things that I've been saying quite a lot in interviews is that we were probably all told when we left hospital that our spinal cord injury was incurable and untreatable, and that is no longer true. We can now, I think, accurately say that a spinal cord is at the very least improvable. And that is just, as we all know, as Dan said in that clip, when you're got an injury like this, even the smallest improvements can make a transformational difference. So yeah, I think that's where we are now. So that's huge.
Sure. Obviously, we're going to talk about this in a little while with Hannah, but I think a lot of our clinical trial direction is really driven by feedback from the spinal cord injury community, kind of pieces that would mean the world and make a big difference to
Mm,
people.
mm.
And obviously, a big part of the work that led to the RKX getting its usage was around, hand and arm function, for example, wasn't it? So, we
Yeah.
really are trying to restore function and trying to just, as you and Dan have both said, in small ways, improve people's quality of life.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this injury steals so many functions from you that curing it will be a journey of restoring those functions one by one. And as we know, as injured people, the media is obsessed by people leaping out of their wheelchairs and walking. And we know there are so many other things that need, addressing first. And, hand and arm function, if you are a tetraplegic, not living without hand function, one of the things that makes us a dominant race in the world is opposable thumbs. And if you don't have opposable thumbs, that makes life pretty damn tricky, I can tell you from experience. But also, bowel and bladder function, a huge thing for comfort and for dignity and for confidence. And pain and spasticity, also huge things. We know that from our lived experience. So yes, those are all things and breathing function as well, those are all things that we are looking at as very important, over and above not that we're not looking at walking as well, but we know that all of those things need looking at, not just the one.
So obviously, we're coming to the end of a calendar year that's been a really busy and exciting year in this space. Thinking about, how proud and excited we are about what we hope to deliver with the Alliance, could you speak a little bit about what you hope to see happening in 2026 and beyond?
Yes, okay. So my Father Christmas letter, dear Santa, please can I? Yeah, so I will be. I mean, I'm just really, really excited. So obviously, what we are doing immediately is, well, not immediate, but very early in the new year, is launching our pilot of network centres that will have an RKX machine, and so we will be, seeing that applied to people in the community, in a real world situation, and following very closely about what it does and how it works and what's going on, and trying to feed all of that data back to the research field, because neuromodulation as a field is very, very new, and the numbers of people, I think in the Uplift trial there were like 45 people, we know in Pathfinder there were 10, that's
So,
65
sorry,
people.
so just to explain
Yeah,
this, so the
sorry,
uplift trial was the trial that
sorry.
was run, wasn't it, by using the RKX device in the
Yeah,
States, yeah, which
yes,
then had
so
the FDA approval, yeah.
yeah, so that was the trial that they used to get themselves certified for FDA, EU, and UK clearance. So it was called Uplift, and it was about hand and arm function. That's why the license is for hand and arm function on tetraplegics. So yeah, so really seeing it work in the real world and how that goes is going to be fascinating and exciting. And then obviously we're going to be driving forward with our fundraising, and we want to raise lots more money, because we want to supply more machines to more centres, so that our vision is that you will have a network across the country. That means that anybody with a spinal cord injury is within an hour and a half's drive of a centre that has one. That's our vision. I mean, obviously that depends on our fundraising, and that's what we're pushing for. And then we've got money set aside, and we're doing a call for another clinical trial now, to have a look at further neurotech stuff. But we also want to raise more money for the Alliance to run further clinical trials. Some of the other promising therapies that are sitting in the background right now are things like intermittent hypoxia, plasticity enhancing drugs, stuff like that. So obviously, I don't know how much detail you want to get into about what the RKX does, but it will work differently on different people. So for those people who don't get a lot of result from it, we could be looking to run a trial where we go, okay, well, let's pair it with something else and see if that boosts the effect. Because what we do know is there's not going to be one silver bullet that cures this. It's going to be a combination of approaches. So yeah, we're just, I mean, there's it's so exciting to be in this situation, and yeah, to be able to start delivering something tangible and seeing some results after years and years. Because I think we'll all say, anybody in a chair, we've heard so many media stories of breakthroughs this and miracle that and cure the other, and nothing ever has been delivered ever. We've never actually, people in chairs have never received any treatment, and now they are going to be receiving a treatment, and we're going to do the best we can to try and make that available as much as we can, but that will depend on the fundraising.
Yeah, right, thank you. So Hannah, moving on, it'd be great to have a little chat with you as well. Thank you so much for joining us. It would be lovely to hear about you and your professional background, and just to understand a bit about how you came to work in the field of clinical trials.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invite to this meeting. My name's Hannah. I'm a research physiotherapist at the London Spinal Cord Injury Centre. A bit of background about myself. I started out, did an undergrad in physiology and sports science, and that's when I was sort of first introduced into the world of research processes. I then pursued a degree in physiotherapy, so the doctorate of physiotherapy, where I did my basic physio training alongside doctoral training, so research projects, service development within the NHS. And it was there that I worked at the Glasgow Spinal Injury Unit on some resistance training interventions and physical activity promotion as well. And that was, yeah, my introduction into the world of spinal cord injury research, and really sparked passion and enjoyment for that field, generally within the neurological population, but specifically within spinal cord injury. So when I qualified, I knew that I wanted to pursue a dual role, so within physio, but also within research. And a post came up down here at the London Spinal Unit to join the team here in the neurourology and FARS team, which were looking at transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation and bladder function. So I was fortunate to join the team here and that was a two-year project, also funded by Spinal Research, and that's evolved into the IMPRESS trial, the epidural spinal cord stim trial. So I've been here with the team for 4 years now, and really developing within this specialty. And it's a really multidisciplinary team here, comprised of physios, nurses, clinical scientists, engineers, surgeons. So yeah, it's a great team that we have here, and we're doing a huge amount of work within neuromodulation and pelvic health. And I've also had a clinical role alongside my research role, and now specialising in the pelvic health side of things.
Thank you so much. I'm sure, like me, like lots of people who've joined the call this evening, I didn't know anything about clinical trials and the process and how it all works and how it gets put together. I suppose it would be lovely to hear a bit about the process from, I guess, the inception of an idea and what the steps are to then get that to a place where an actual clinical trial is happening, and also how long that process can take.
Yeah, so it can take a really long time. A huge amount of work and effort goes into taking that sort of initial idea or concept forward and developing it into a research trial. So I suppose thinking about the idea itself, so ideas can be sparked from lots of different avenues. We talk about sort of priority setting, and you might be aware in terms of in spinal cord injury of setting out priorities of what's the most important. And we've already heard in relation to bladder, bowel, pelvic health, as well as upper limb function. And these topic areas are often focused upon in terms of them obviously being a priority, and so being a target for future research trials. So it can come from a point like that, but it can also come from a clinical question that's raised, or from PPI, so patient and public involvement, feeding into research teams. And so specific to our centre, we would develop a research idea and get more information about that topic area. So perform a literature search, do more reading around the area, find out what's been done in that area, and what are the gaps there, what is the question or the problem that we're trying to solve. And then we build that into a protocol ultimately in terms of how are we going to address that. And I made reference to PPI, so patient and public involvement. So we're fortunate at our centre, we've got a group that advises on our research ideas and develops this from concept all the way through. And these are people with lived experience of spinal cord injury, as well as folk that have previously taken part in our research. And so, they're key and essential to developing that idea. Obviously, the work itself can't take place without funding. So once we've got that idea, once we generated that protocol, we go to funding applications. So we submit to charities for funding, which often means putting together details of background, study details, costings, etc. There's often feedback and iterations that happen. And then beyond that, once the funding is hopefully secured, building of the research team, a lot of documentation work in terms of the protocol risk assessment, participant information in terms of what we put out there, and then most importantly, the ethics process. So once we've got the funding, once we've generated all the documentation, taking it into ethics. So we have the IRAS system, which is part of the Health Research Authority, which we submit our project to. That'll be submitted to a research ethics committee that will review everything that you're planning on doing and make sure that it's all appropriate. And these are panels made up of a range of professional backgrounds, members of the general public. They'll review everything. You'll often meet with them as like a panel discussion, and there'll often be iterations in order to develop the protocol and what you're doing. And then hopefully once approval is in place, sponsor, site approval of where the research will actually take place, an agreement, and getting the trial out there. So there's a requirement for all trials to be published on a public database. So most commonly this is clinical trials. And obviously we've already made reference to the wonderful Spinal Research trial tracker as well. And so, yeah, once the study is up and running, it will open to recruitment and be advertised, and we'll be able to get started. So it can take a number of years to get to that point, and it depends on the hurdles that occur along the way. But yeah, it can take a bit of time.
And obviously quite a lot of people involved as well from what you've said. So as you've referenced already, you're in the middle of doing some clinical trial activity at the moment in partnership with us at Stanmore. Could you talk a little bit about the IMPRESS, it's the IMPRESS trial, obviously for in lay terms, if you like, for the audience, that would be really great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at epidural spinal cord stimulation to target bladder and bowel function in individuals with spinal cord injury. So in terms of that, in layman terms, we're looking at electrical stimulation to the spinal cord. In terms of what that looks like as someone who were to participate, generally it's a sort of 1 year participation from that initial expression of interest all the way through to the end point. There's a screening process where we'll review eligibility. We obviously have quite a strict criteria based on what we are doing, and should they be suitable to proceed with the trial, we'll conduct baseline assessments, which will look at largely bladder and bowel tests, questionnaires, all those kinds of things. And then they will come in for the procedure itself, have a recovery period at home, and then come back in for programming. So we set up the stimulator device specifically to target pelvic floor function, bladder function, and bowel function. And once suitably optimized in terms of those programs, be having time at home to use the device itself for 12 weeks in combination with pelvic floor muscle training, and whilst having regular interaction with the study team and support and follow-up face-to-face visits during that period. And then there's later follow-up throughout the duration. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
You're still recruiting, aren't you, to try to get more participants in that?
Yeah, we are.
So yeah, we're going to share some information at the end around if anyone who's on the call is interested in finding out more about potentially taking part. That would be great. I know obviously a big part of clinical trials for the participants is going to be the improvements that they might get for themselves. And, I know there's no guarantees, but I guess if you could talk a little bit about some of the potential benefits that you might hope to see for people taking part in IMPRESS.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously we're always hopeful for favourable outcomes from any work that we do. And we are very careful in terms of not promising favourable outcomes. We we can't guarantee it in terms of exploring a new idea, a new concept, especially within the heterogeneity of spinal cord injury. But certainly, firstly, generally speaking, a key benefit is, I suppose, the idea of giving back to spinal cord injury community. We're largely going to be developing the knowledge within the field of pelvic health, spinal cord stimulation, spinal cord injury. The work that we're doing is going to give us a much greater insight into bladder and bowel presentation within spinal cord injury, and also the role of neuromodulation. Specifically to our study, we're looking at the sort of the short-term effects of the stimulation as well as the longer-term effects, specifically to bladder. And a favourable outcome, I suppose, would be the fact that we're targeting that bladder overactivity, so potentially giving an individual longer to get to the toilet, reducing the risk of leakage. In terms of the bowel side of things, speeding up that bowel transit time, reducing bowel management time, so the time taken on the toilet. Potential other benefits, I suppose, are around the education around pelvic floor itself and understanding what it is, the role, how to activate. And I think largely as well, specific to working in our team, we're a very specialist team, and we do lots of clinical investigations as part of the trial itself. And I think it's an opportunity to learn a lot more about your bladder and bowel, pelvic floor, but also we can, with their permission, share investigations that are conducted with their treating team as well, with their local spinal injury unit. And so I know that that's been a particular benefit that others have reported within the trial.
Oh, thank you so much, Anna. That was really interesting. Suzanne, should we move on to you? Does that sound good? Thank you very much for joining us. Again, as with Tara, it'd be just great to hear a little bit about you and your injury and then how you came to be involved in clinical trials. I should just say, obviously, you're involved in a clinical trial that's been developed by Grégoire Courtine, and who's a neuroscientist, and then neurosurgeon Jocelyn Block, haven't you, using a digital bridge system, as it said on the opening slide. So, yes, over to you.
Correct. Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Suzanne. I have a T89 complete. I'm going to use that word. I know, Tara, we don't like that word, but I was diagnosed with a complete Asia A injury. It was around 15 years ago. I was on a balcony in Morocco that collapsed, and I fell about 30 feet and broke my back. So yeah, that is my injury. And yeah, as you said, Louisa, I have been involved this year in a pretty huge clinical trial out in Switzerland with Grégoire and Jocelyn and the NeuroRestore team, where I was implanted with various things in my brain, in my spine, which we kind of connected it all up. And the trial is called Think to Go. So it is about brain-controlled walking.
Oh, so I'd be lovely to hear about the process, I guess. And I mean that in two ways, really. I suppose partly the process in a practical sense, but then also your thought process in terms of making the decision to be, because, it's a big thing having an implant, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, it was a big thing. So I kind of came across this clinical trial similar to Tara. I've always kind of kept on top of what's happening in the world of clinical trials and research with spinal injuries. I think it makes sense if you have some kind of condition or illness to kind of see what's going on in the world of, I won't use the word cures, but, therapies, treatments. And I've always done a lot of rehab. I've always, kind of kept myself in good shape. Not in the hope that someone would come along, but just because, if something does come along, it's worthwhile making sure that, you are still standing regularly, stretching regularly, making sure that you can be in an upright position, and, you've got as good health as you can. So I came across NeuroRestore. I've known a lot about Grégoire and Jocelyn for a number of years. And so I was signed up, I guess, for their similar, like a trial tracker thing, where I find out about the different trials that they have going on. And they contacted me last summer to say they had a trial that they thought I might be eligible for. I met some of the initial criteria, and they didn't tell me much about the trial, but they asked a ton of questions. They wanted to see, MRI scans, CT scans. They wanted to see pictures of me in a standing frame. They wanted videos of me with my physio, sort of showing range of motion. So I sent all that off to them, and then they got back to me pretty quickly and said they wanted to jump on a Zoom call, tell me about the trial. So it kind of went from there. And as you said, it's a big decision. When I found out what the trial was, I was pretty mind blown because I was like, wow, this is a big deal. This one, this is they've done a lot of implants into the spine, and obviously there's the RKS stuff, RKX stuff. But this one to have a brain implant as well, I was like, oh, do I want someone, doing surgery on my brain, implanting something there? But ultimately, I did decide to go ahead with it. I, really trusted the team there. I really liked the team there, and have had such a positive experience, such, exciting stuff that we've discovered. And I think, one of my overall messages is these researchers need us. We have spinal injuries. They are learning so much from us. And, particularly, whether it's the bladder one with Hannah, whether it's, similar to what I did, they really, really need our bodies and our feedback and our input, because without us, they can't make progress. So, that was, I'm not saying I got personal gains out of this as well, but they can't develop, they cannot progress unless we are part of these trials. So they really do need us.
No, that's a really, really good point. And I think that's a key thing about the alliance that we've launched is, for us, people with spinal cord injuries are such a huge part of that. And, if it's something like getting involved in Trial Tracker, getting involved with the clinical trial, or even, just having the app and recording data from any wearable that you might have and sharing that with us, like it's everything contributes. And we really do want people with spinal cord injury to see that they can be part of this progress and play an active role in the kind of function restoration and pathway to a cure that we're so passionate about. Um, Obviously, you said you're not a saint. I guess hopes and expectations going into it. Did you energized, nervous, all of the above?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I love a physical challenge. I've always been very sporty. I love that kind of thing. So I kind of brushed aside the whole surgery part of it. Although I think, us with spinal injuries, we're kind of accustomed to some kind of surgery or medical intervention. So, you just kind of go with it. And then, yeah, so they set expectations very early on. This is not a cure. And just to make it clear, like I'm still very much paralyzed sitting here today on this call. I have to be, connected to a laptop. I have to wear a hat, which has an antenna that connects to my brain implant. So, I have not been cured. I have not had neurological recovery. However, what I do have is that when I am connected to these things, and I also have a watch that can give me various programs, I can do a couple of things. I can do brain controlled walking. So that is short distances with a walking frame, but I don't have to have, a physio helping with my knees. And when I think left step, it will translate into a left step, and then right step, left step. So that's pretty cool that basically a computer is reading my brain intentions, and then it is translating it into stimulation that goes directly to my nerves below my injury to make that step happen. So that's one of the really cool things that I can do. And then the other is that we can do direct stimulation to my spine. So without the brain controlled things, but I have different programs on a watch. So I can do like core stimulation, so I can sit up straighter. We managed to find one so that my legs can kick for when I'm swimming. Just kind of things like that. I can do like leg extensions, just different things to, exercise my legs, my core. There's an anti-spasticity program. So, they kind of went in setting expectations that, this is not a cure, but we will hopefully be able to do some cool things. The goal for them with the trial was obviously, unassisted walking, brain controlled walking. And we got to that stage, which was amazing. And it has been life-changing for me. It's I think seeing progress was probably the most exciting thing, sort of seeing that the more we put in training and the more that time went on, we were getting better at these things. I was in a body weight support harness at the start, and that was taking half of my body weight. We were gradually lowering that, and then I came out of the body weight support, so I was walking, more unassisted. So it's been pretty phenomenal, a very positive experience for me. I realize that is not always the case with these trials. So I think maintaining expectations and just, not getting ahead of yourself and thinking this is a cure, this is going to happen as a result of this, but just, taking it as it comes. I very much saw it as, I'm their athlete, I'm their guinea pig. I will do what they want me to do. I just need to stay, in good health, in good shape. And so, yeah, it's been great for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good point. And, obviously, like Dan in the video is talking about the benefits he got from that trial, but his benefits were different to, great, bigger than Tara's were, and different to other people. So it is, yes, it's so different for everybody, isn't it? What's the time frame then of this trial, and like does the implant come out at some point? Like what how does that work?
Yeah, so they have funding for this specific Think to Go trial for 3 participants. I was the second participant, and it is 6 months in Lausanne with them out there. So again, a big decision to make to move my life across there for a few months, and then it's technically 6 months at home. So it's a year-long trial. 6 months there, 6 months at home. But then I've actually just signed to continue it beyond that. So I sort of stay part of the family. If I want to, I can be explanted at any time. If I don't want to be part of this, they will, update me with any software updates, hardware updates as needed. The third participant, he's there at the moment. He got implanted a couple of months ago, I think in September. So I'm not sure what happens after the 3 participants. I believe that they want to implant more people with this, and they want to sort of expand it, which is super exciting. They also have an upper limb trial as well that they've been doing at the same time. They've been doing a blood pressure trial as well, which is super exciting. I really like that one. So they've got a lot going on out there. And yeah, it's just a great team.
No, I mean, obviously, and that's something that we're seeing with the RQX device and with other treatments. Like clinical trial is one part of it. It starts small, and then obviously that's a pathway to getting approval in the various different, whether that's the FDA in the States or EU approval, or in the UK, and across the globe. But then, of course, there is still that piece around continuing to gather data and understanding what treatments look like. And one clinical trial and something coming through to treatment doesn't mean that like that's done. It's very much like an ongoing iterative process, isn't it? There's been a couple of questions that I've noticed that have been coming in around, future plans for RQX, future plans for implanted devices coming through. And so much of that is going to be about funding more trials to extend the usage for something like RQX, or, however Gregoire and Jocelyn would want to build on what they've been doing with U3. So yes, it's not like one trial's done and then that's the answer by any means, is it? It'd be interesting actually. This is probably a question for both you and Tara, you Suzanne and Tara, about I guess just what you would say to somebody who does have a spinal cord injury and who might be interested in taking part in a trial. Tara, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I'd say sign up for the trial tracker because, I mean, I know that I would say that, wouldn't I? But that's the whole point of the trial tracker, is that you put in your details, your level and your location, and it contacts you when something that comes up is that you're eligible for. And then you can consider whether it's something you want to take part. You're not signed up for anything. You're just saying, I might be interested, tell me more, and it will come to you and tell you. And the trial tracker, it's only those trials that meet strict medical protocols and standards that feature. So you're also safe from kind of a load of cowboys going, oh, let's see what this does, which does happen a bit, but those trials will not be on there. So you'll be on a proper trial that works to all the right standards for the world. So yeah, that's what I'd say. And the final thing I would say is I was under the naive assumption that people would be queuing up for trials, and they're really not. So if you sign up, you have got a good chance of getting on a trial. If you're prepared to make the commitment and find the time. So that's what I would say.
Okay. No, and also that is a really good point that you make about the making sure that trials are, happening in a country that's got really stringent guidelines around, like some of the ethical stuff that Hannah was talking about, the way that trials are structured, because, there are things, aren't there, like internationally that offer the world to people with spinal cord injuries.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say stem cells are the thing at the moment, stem cell operations that promise the world. There is absolutely no medical proof that they work on people with spinal cord injury, and some proof that what you actually do is potentially create something that may grow a cancer. And that's what they're looking at the moment. They haven't, the only thing that stem cells are cleared for in the first world is for blood disorders at the moment. And we're working on it, we're looking at it, but proper trials have not shown any real difference yet, and that we're still working our way around it. So that will come. That is an area that we're looking at. But you go on these websites and you read about stem cell operations and what they say on there, and my God, they sound convincing, and they claim all sorts of things, but we know that that's just not the case. So that's an absolute classic. So if you are signed up to the trial tracker, you know that the people who contact you or that talk about trials are kosher. Yeah.
For sure, thank you. So yes, Susanna, also, what would you say to somebody who's interested in a
Yeah,
trial?
I would say similar to Sarah, definitely Tara, sorry. Definitely stay signed up to things so that you can keep up to date with what's going on. But I would also say look after your bodies. If something is, it's demoralizing, it's boring, getting in a standing frame every day, doing stretching, all of that, I've been doing it for 15 years. It's kind of tedious, especially when you're not seeing any difference from doing it. But it is important. We do need to stay healthy. We do need to look after ourselves so that I'm going to say when something sort of comes around that is, treatments, therapies, that you are eligible for it and that it is something that will benefit you. Muscle atrophy is something that is, a really tricky thing. But if you do want to be able to weight bear and stand and walk again, you need to make sure that you are kept in good health. Tight hip flexors, tight hamstrings, all of that kind of thing. So, I think that was a massive benefit for me, that I was still, can still be in an upright position and can still, move all my legs and stuff. And that is testimony to the fact that I have put in the work over the years to maintain that. So, it can be boring. I know that rehab is expensive, that kind of thing, but unfortunately, it is worthwhile doing.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had some questions come in while we've been talking, which I will just select a few and we can go through them. There's a question that's come in around, I suppose it's connected to what we've just been talking about, which, so Susanna, Tara, you might have a view on this, is I guess that decision to get involved in a trial that's in a sort of early development stage versus potentially waiting for later trials when, protocols might have been tightened, the benefits might be greater. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a tricky one. And I thought about this a lot when I was out there of, if this hadn't have been Gregoire and Jocelyn and, a very well-established team, would I have done this? And I think a perfect example is what Elon Musk is doing, who is, throwing a lot of money at these things and just implanting people left, right, and center. If it had been that kind of thing, I don't think I would have done it because, it is a risk. It is, you're putting your body on the line. And so I think I love what Tara was saying about, the trial tracker has got the very, established, it's none of this snake oil therapy stuff. It is the legitimate stuff. And so, it is a big decision. I would recommend, if anyone is getting involved with the trial, to spend time with that team, talk to them, ask all your questions, all of that kind of thing. And, my gut was telling me that this was the right one and something I wanted to be part of. And, and as I said, it's worked out really well. But I think, unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation out there. And so, you do have to be smart about it.
I suppose as well, Tara, as you said earlier, it's not just you get one bite at the cherry of being part of a trial. So there's potential to be involved in something that's at an early developmental stage and then, a year or two later, but actually take part in something else.
Yeah, or a few months, depending on what the trial is. So yeah, basically, just because you've taken part in one trial doesn't mean you can't take part in a second trial, and a completely different one. And I think the thing is, it's a very personal decision. It's your body. You need to decide what you are prepared to do with it and what you're not prepared to do with. But that's what I said about the trial tracker. When you sign up to the trial tracker, you're saying I'm interested potentially. You're not saying I'm doing it. So when somebody says, well, there's this trial, what about it? Ask lots of questions. Make sure that you're clear about exactly what is involved and what isn't involved, and what both the benefits and the potential risks might be. Be clear about that as well. And then it is a completely personal decision that you must take as to whether you're prepared to do it. So, yeah.
Thank you. We've had a question come in that's around, I suppose, the transition from something coming out of being a clinical trial piece and as ArcheX has, and then becoming something that's kind of on the market and being used. Obviously, there's a big difference between that clinical trial piece, which has all of the very strict and robust protocols and, selection criteria around it. I suppose it's interesting, maybe, Tara, we could talk a little bit about ArcheX and what has been happening, in the States and what the plan is in the UK around what that change looks like as something comes out of trial settings and into actual usage. And, part of that, I think, is going to be what we've been talking about, isn't it? Around, gathering more data as things go so that, globally, the company that produced ArcEX have got this picture of what happens when it's in the wild. Um, and then, of course, there's the usage license piece, isn't there, which is related to what something's been given approval for. So, I don't know if you've got any kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, somebody said when we were talking about it, what clinical trials test is efficacy and what the real world test is efficiency. Because, if for some people, so what we're looking at, one of the whole reasons about setting up, the RKX within the alliance as much as we can, and again, that's dependent on funding, but is to try and see, to collect consistent data about what happens in the real world. So, for example, the trial protocols, when I did Pathfinder, it was 2 hours, 3 times a week. And Uplift, I think, was 3 to 5 times a week. And over a certain period, so Pathfinder was a year, Uplift, I think, was 3 to 4 months. Again, I'd have to check that because I wasn't, we weren't involved in the Uplift so much. But I think, we don't know what it will do in the real world. So one of the big things is physiotherapy is expensive. So if, for example, we found out in the real world that somebody was just using it once a week, but they were still seeing an effect from it, that's an actually incredibly valuable learning, just both from a time and a cost thing, to say, well, actually, it has an effect if you only use it once a week, or alternatively, just as valuable to know that it doesn't work if you only use it once a week. So, we're doing our tiny bit, as much as we can in a very small way, to try and get some consistent data from the real world back to researchers. And as we said, the license for the RKX at the moment is only for upper limb function. And obviously the big thing we saw in Pathfinder is we used it on all levels. So we went from people like a C5, I think, through to a T12. So we saw the effect. So Dan, who appeared in that video at the beginning, he's a para, he's not a tetra. And we saw it have effects on people more than 20 years post-injury and at all spinal levels. So that's very encouraging. But at the moment, they're not looking at a license for paraplegics. So some clinics, and again, I don't know which ones, but I know we've talked to a few, are potentially looking at their insurance policies to see whether people could just sign a disclaimer if they're a paraplegic that they're happy to use it, and to see what happens. But that's not under our control. So yeah, there's a bit of it, as you said, it's a bit like the Wild West, because this is a very new stage. So we're doing our small bit in a few centres as much as we can to gather some real world data and see what happens. Yeah.
Exactly. And of course, there will be ongoing clinical trials to expand the usage of the RKX and, get to a place where it's being,
they are looking at blood pressure trials and all
usable
sorts of things for it. There's a lot going on.
So it's definitely like it's a process that builds over time, isn't it?
It's never going to. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? Is that we'd all love it to be this fully developed therapy that lands, and then you go, right, this is exactly how you use it, and this is exactly what will work, and this is exactly what it will do. It's never going to be like that, I'm afraid. It's only ever going to have to evolve, and we're all going to have to do our part on feeding back and learning and working stuff out as we go.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question that's come in actually that's around like the practical side of taking part in trials. I don't know, maybe Hannah, if you could speak to this as well as for Impress participants. Obviously, there's the cost element, isn't there? And Suzanne, you said you moved to Switzerland for it. How does that tend to work in terms of, reimbursement of costs, or like what's covered if you do take part in a trial?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's different for different trials depending on the funding available. We were fortunate that we were able to set aside £50 per research visit for our participants. And depending on where they're traveling from and the time and input varies in terms of how much that goes towards, and it's a really important factor, and we don't want that to be a barrier to participating in research, but sometimes it can be, and so having that conversation early if you are expressing interest in a trial, to find out what funding streams are available or reimbursement is available early on, as well as commitment to the trial. So how many visits, where do they take place, and knowing exactly what you're going to be doing throughout the whole timeline can help planning for that.
We've had a couple of questions come in around, the whole global UK, US kind of mix of trials. I think I just wanted to say that, so the trial trackers that we've set up, we are a UK-based organisation, but we do share information about trials that are happening, reputable trials that are happening across the world. So it's worth signing up, wherever you're based. But then I know there are specific trial tracker type offerings in Canada and in the States as well. So we can potentially find out some more information about that and then share it with attendees afterwards. I think it's interesting. There's some comments coming through around just like being bold and pushing forward, and but the kind of now that we're starting to see gains in this space, and we're talking about more clinical trials happening, just I guess being bullish. And I think that ambition and passion is something that we definitely have as an organisation. And yeah, I think the people that are delivering the trials and the things that we've been talking about, all of that is really driven by a desire to get treatment to people, like into the hands of people living with a spinal cord injury. Like, that's what drives all of the physical therapists that we've been talking to about the rollout of the RQX machine. All of this is really about let's be bold and do what we can to push this forward. I suppose it was Hannah, maybe again this might be something that you could speak to, is I guess the question of the potential downside to being part of a trial. Like there is a chance that a trial could set someone back, or just what the process is to sort of, I guess, safeguard people against that kind of stuff. And I guess that's also part of the ethics process, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we do try and protect and prevent against that as much as possible. I think from my side, we're very clear in terms of expectation management from early on in terms of the trial itself. But yeah, the downside, it's hard to speak on. I think ultimately with a trial, there's no guarantee that they're going to have a benefit from the trial. So I suppose as long as that expectation is managed, it can still be a downside ultimately if there isn't a direct benefit. But yeah, that's what I would say on that.
Right, thank you. Tara, we've had a question around, because I know you've been part of more than one trial. What, in your experience, and maybe actually Hannah, you can answer this as well. If somebody has taken part in multiple trials, what the sort of like, I guess, fallow period needs to be between being part of different things, or if taking part in a trial might exclude you from future things.
I think it really depends on the trials and what the therapies are. So the two that I were on were both transcutaneous stimulation. One was for full body, which was the Pathfinder, and one was for hand and arm function only. And I think the period in between was 3 or 4 months. But yeah, I mean, it completely depends on what the trial was. So I think you just have to ask the question. And also the other thing I'd add about things, so I was one of the people that RQX did not do a lot for, or the transcutaneous stimulation I had on the second trial, which was a different machine. But what I would say to that is I'm still really glad I took part, because you need people who it doesn't work on to understand why it doesn't work and help improve. And that just because that didn't work doesn't mean that something else wouldn't, or that it might not work in combination with another therapy. So, all of that data is still really important. And, I would rather take part and know than kind of sit at home and wonder what if. So I don't regret doing it at all.
Yeah, and I would just add in terms of our trial specifically, we just ask that the participants aren't taking part in another trial at the same time, just to keep it as controlled as possible. And then in addition to that, we have a specific inclusion/exclusion criteria, which needs to be met.
Yeah, for sure. We've had a question come in about, it's specifically about the RQX device, but I think it's relevant for future potential treatments as well, is around, obviously in the UK we've got the National Health Service. It's a very different picture in the States. There's different scenarios with health insurance in different countries. Obviously currently the RQX is licensed for usage, but is not part of standard NICE approved treatment guidelines within the NHS, is it? So that's also something that we're interested in working towards, and engaging with different NHS centres to try to get them part of any pilot activity that we do, but then also just trying to build a picture of the impact that spinal stimulation, function recovery, what that can deliver to people, to try to kind of move the needle a little bit on what official treatment is available on the NHS. Yeah, so that's part of like the long journey from, you know, lab science through translational stuff into an idea, into developing that into a trial, and then, you know, hopefully that becoming a therapeutic, and then that therapeutic becoming readily available. Like it is a, you know, it's a long process, but as we've said tonight, you know, I think there's a lot of people on this call interested and passionate and really wanting to drive that forward as much as they can.
Yeah, and the ArchiEx needs to be paired with rehab. So that's the important thing to say about this, is that it isn't the ArchiEx itself that does the return of function. It is the fact that it wakes up the spinal cord so that it's more receptive to something, and it's the rehab that then retrains while the spinal cord, if you like, is listening. So, you know, one of the issues you have inside the NHS is they don't do long-term outpatient rehab. This is not going to work over a number of weeks. It has to work over at least several months. And so, yeah, we're, you know, that is NHS policy, is not within our power. That's not something we can affect. But we do work very closely with people within the NHS. The Spark network is, you know, working with the spinal units. And obviously we want to make it as available as, we would love to make it as available as possible. But yeah, it has to go through so many systems and processes that aren't anything to do with spinal research or that we can control on that front.
And also we're part of a coalition of charities that are working with sort of all-party parliamentary group around having a national strategy for spinal cord injury. And a big part of that, from our perspective, is what the treatment and rehab pathway looks like for people to, obviously, for acute and chronic spinal cord injury patients. So,
and when we're kind of the pioneers, it's a bit like you know, think about those cowboy films about opening up the Wild West, where everybody kind of went in there and didn't know what they were doing. We are those first pioneers. We're taking our wagons in, and we're all finding out, you know, because we're in a world that's never been a landscape that's never existed before, which is a world where there are treatments coming through for spinal cord injury.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I'm going to start to wrap it up now, looking at the time. Thank you so much. This has been a really great session. Thank you, panelists, for joining. Thank you for everyone who has joined us from home. But there were some questions that were coming in around how to sign up for Trial Tracker, where to find it. There's some information about that on screen, or if you just go to our website, it's the links to it are on our homepage. So please do, if you're interested, have a little look at that and sign up, and you can get some more information and potentially match with a trial. Also, we've got some more information too about the Impress trial that Hannah was talking about, which, as we said, is still looking for participants. So again, please do either contact us, you can email us at info@, and we can pass information on to Hannah, or again, you can use the QR code or email addresses on here if you do want to find out more about potentially taking part. But obviously, all of you for sharing your experiences and expertise, and the journeys that you've been on. I really hope it's been educational and interesting for the guys at home. I think we've had a lot of hope as well tonight. That's a really key part for our mission to cure paralysis. So I wish all of you and everyone at home a really hopeful and happy Christmas, and we'll see you again in 2026. Thank you.